Europe is cracking under pressure. Diesel prices surged 8% in just 1 week after Ukrainian strikes hit Russian oil facilities. At the same time, German factories recorded their worst losing streak since the Euro crisis. And while Brussels hesitated, China pressed ahead, pulling in global partners with an economy growing 3 times faster than Europe's. Then Slovakia's Prime Minister Robert Fico said out loud what few EU leaders dared to admit: "Have you lost your minds?" This wasn't just a political outburst, it was a warning, exposing what he calls Europe's arrogance, hypocrisy and blind spots that could accelerate its slide from power to irrelevance. Fico's first flashpoint was Ukraine's strikes inside Russia. According to Reuters, in August 2025, attacks on oil refineries disabled 15% of Russia's processing capacity, briefly pushing European diesel prices up by 8% in a single week. For Kyiv, these operations were retaliation. For Brussels, proof of resilience. But for Fico, they were sabotage of Europe's fragile stability. His claim: Slovakia and its neighbors cannot secure their energy if Ukraine keeps escalating inside Russian territory. Critics in Brussels argue the opposite, that such strikes drain Moscow's war chest and deter further aggression. But the clash reveals a deeper question. Should Europe focus on maximum pressure or on limiting collateral damage? The tension sharpened when Fico confronted President Zelensky directly. Bloomberg reported that since June, Ukraine had doubled drone raids on Russian energy assets. Fico's response was blunt: "You cannot protect your national interests by damaging ours." To some, this sounds alarmist. To others, pragmatic. Diesel shocks ripple fast into transport, farming, and heating. And if Europe cracks under those costs, does deterrence really grow stronger or weaker? China became his next battlefield. While EU leaders skipped Beijing's 85th anniversary celebrations, Fico showed up. He mocked Brussels' absence as self-imposed isolation. The Financial Times noted in July that nearly 80% of Europe's rare earth imports still come from China, critical for electric cars and wind turbines. By ignoring Beijing, Fico argued, Europe wasted a chance to influence its biggest supplier. Brussels counters: engaging China risks legitimizing authoritarianism and deepening dependency. The European Commission's June strategy even labeled Beijing both a partner and a systemic rival. Neutral analysis suggests it's a lose-lose choice. Distance erodes access to raw materials, closeness erodes political principles. Fico chose pragmatism. Critics say he underestimates the long-term costs. His critique of Russia policy cut even deeper. Fico insists normalization must remain possible despite sanctions. He pointed out that Western companies never truly left Russia. The Wall Street Journal confirmed more than 400 foreign firms still operate there. Reuters added that in May, Russia actually supplied 11% more liquefied natural gas to Europe, despite rhetoric of energy independence. For Fico, Europe's morality is theater, business is reality. Brussels insists sanctions still matter, as signals of resolve and as constraints on Moscow's future capacity. The real test is whether symbolism can justify the costs when loopholes keep trade flowing. Fico didn't stop there. He pointed to scandal inside the EU itself. He cited former Justice Commissioner Didier Reynders, investigated in Belgium for alleged money laundering, a case widely covered in June. His point: how can Brussels lecture Moscow or Beijing on corruption when its own house isn't clean? EU officials counter that scrutiny itself proves accountability. But public trust tells another story. Eurobarometer surveys in July showed confidence in EU institutions below 50% in half of member states, the lowest in over a decade. Industry added more fuel. Bloomberg reported in August that China briefly delayed export licenses for rare earths, disrupting production in Germany and Slovakia. Fico said Chinese officials privately assured him Slovakia's request would face no issues. His claim: bilateral pragmatism secures survival, while EU pride risks shortages. Critics warn that such side deals fracture Europe and weaken collective bargaining power. On NATO, Fico was explosive. He said Ukraine must never join. Peace, he argued, requires security guarantees for both Kyiv and Moscow. To Brussels, this sounds like capitulation. To him, it's math. If we keep pushing NATO expansion, the war will never end. The Wall Street Journal later reported that some European diplomats quietly floated mutual security guarantees as part of a settlement framework. Neutral analysis frames Fico's stance not as pro-Russian, but as recognition of limits. Wars rarely end with parades, they end with redrawn maps. Critics, however, warn that blocking Ukraine's NATO path only emboldens Moscow. Meanwhile, IMF data in July 2025 revealed Europe's share of global GDP slipped below 14% for the first time. China and emerging markets continue to climb. This is the steepest decline in Europe's position since 2013. Fico's warning that Europe risks irrelevance isn't just rhetoric. The numbers back it up. German manufacturing output fell 2.8% year-on-year in August, marking 6 straight quarters of contraction, the worst since the Euro crisis. Slovakia, heavily tied to car exports, faces the same risk. Protest movements add pressure. In late August, the Financial Times documented demonstrations in Poland and the Czech Republic over soaring energy bills and food costs. Protesters shouted, "Not against Moscow, against Brussels." Neutral analysis suggests Fico is channeling grievances that already exist, not inventing them. At the same time, U.S. weapon shipments to Ukraine slowed in September amid congressional gridlock, leaving Europe unable to fill the gap. Fico's refusal to station Slovak troops highlighted national limits within EU unity. Globally, multipolar realities deepen. Reuters reported central banks from Turkey to India bought 120 tons of gold in one quarter, with China alone adding more than half. This shift signals a world hedging against Western dominance. Fico's call to respect Beijing resonates with countries already diversifying away from Europe. Fiscal strain adds to the weight. IMF data showed Italy's debt passed 140% of GDP and France's topped 110%. The Eurozone shrank by 0.4% in Q2, the sharpest downturn since the pandemic rebound. Brussels argues its safety nets are strong. Fico says the system is falling apart. Both views have merit, but the debt mountain is undeniable. Critics argue Fico exaggerates. They insist sanctions isolate Russia over time, moral consistency deters aggression, and Europe's green transition demands painful independence. But Fico's retort is sharp. Consistency without effectiveness is theater. Foreign investors seem to agree. The Wall Street Journal reported foreign direct investment into the Eurozone fell 18% year-on-year, the sharpest drop since 2012. Investors watch costs, not speeches. And here lies the paradox. Robert Fico, often dismissed as a pariah, may be voicing vulnerabilities that Brussels only whispers about. Neutral analysis shows he is not always right, but rarely irrelevant. His critics accuse him of undermining solidarity. He counters that solidarity without survival is self-delusion. The bigger picture is harder to ignore. Europe's economic weight is shrinking, public trust is eroding, external dependencies are tightening, and when a single leader shouts what others fear to say, the question isn't whether Europe likes his tone, but whether it can afford to ignore his warning. And the final unsettling question remains, if Europe waits until its leverage has collapsed, who will still be listening when it finally decides to speak? We're glad you're watching Geoscope. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and check out another video we've lined up for you.